folks are disturbed by this and people of color are united. It's not at all like that. But part of the hidden story here is that in order to advance certain policy proposals, it has to appear that the community is united behind them and that anybody who stands against them is standing against them for illegitimate reasons. So that means that the number of people who are willing to express any sort of nuance about what's taking place has to be small, and they have to be dismissible. So what they did is they called me a racist, which is ironic because I'm an anti-racist. I've gone out of my way to, first of all, study the question of why racism occurs, and I believe, been pretty courageous in fighting against it where I've run into it. So to challenge me with that particular epithet was a mistake on their part. It was a strategic mistake. And I kept trying to tell them while this was still internally being discussed in the college, I kept trying to tell them that they should really check the concept that I'm a racist. They should ask, because if they did, they would discover that they were actually way off the mark, and then they would have an interesting puzzle on their hands. Then they would have to explain to themselves why they had found themselves hurling this most poisonous term at somebody who not only isn't a racist, but is pretty nearly the opposite.
Well, it's a standard maneuver when someone wants to silence someone, when someone wants to put someone in a category that's instantly recognizable. One of the best ones is racist.
Oh, absolutely. And what I found is that people simply could not figure out what they would do if that term was applied to them.
Right.
They were able to preview in their minds what that would be like. And so many people could see that there was no escape for them.
Right.
So
it's like being called a rapist almost. It's like even if you are exonerated, there's still that cloud hanging above you.
Yes, but this also actually points to something pretty important. And for anybody who travels this ground themselves, they're going to discover this, that many of the terms that are being used have been redefined, but they haven't been fully redefined. So one of the things that I've seen in several places is that a term like racist has been redefined so that the bar for being a racist is so low that you couldn't possibly help but trip over it. But then once you've tripped over it and you have accepted that you are a racist, then the stigma goes back to the original definition. So it is the dodging and weaving between the two definitions that actually does the heavy lifting.
Well, there's also a really disturbing idea that's being bounced around lately that it's impossible to be racist if you're anything other than white.
Right.
Which is ridiculous.
It's preposterous. Anybody who looks up the actual definition of racism will discover that that's preposterous. But yes, that does pass in certain places as logical.
Yeah, and just it's parroted in this very bizarre way that's supposed to be unchallenged. And this is a fairly recent thing. I mean, this is not something that existed 2 decades ago, right?
I agree. And the pace at which it's moving in the last few years is very surprising.
It is surprising, but it kind of makes sense because you get into these groups of people. They have this confirmation bias. They lump up together, and they all reinforce their ideas in this echo chamber. And they all do it inside the colleges. And then when it gets out to the rest of the world, as we're seeing with your case at Evergreen, the rest of the world is like, what is going on over here? Like, what is happening in school? And people who are sending their children off to school are very concerned with the indoctrination of these ideas. And adopting these very rigid mindsets that the rest of the world just simply could pick apart pretty quickly.